Just ate like 4 tacos, chips with guac and salsa, and like 10 Diet Cokes. And then I went to Wendy's and I got a Frosty.
Wait, where did you get that Frosty? Are you eating another Frosty? Where did you get that Frosty?
How's it going, everyone? My name is Jake Ruddle and I'm one of the content creators here at Youtini.com, and today we are talking to you about the best comics and graphic novels in the Star Wars universe. Many of you all may be aware that outside of the movies and the TV shows, there are tons of Star Wars books and comics that are available to tell stories that are just as good as what you see on the big screen. But we're going to tell you about our favorite comics and graphic novels based off all the reviews that we do at Youtini.com, and it's going to be a really awesome place for you to start if you aren't really sure where to jump in, or if you're just wondering what's the best. Before we get started, I want to remind you all that this video is brought to you by Audible. If you aren't listening to at least some of your favorite Star Wars books, Audible is the perfect place to download those to your phone, whether it's an iPhone, an Android, whatever it is. As long as you can get the Audible app, you will be able to get tons of Star Wars books right in your ears. The best thing about this is if you head over to Youtini.com/audible, it's got all the information that you need to sign up for a subscription. You get a free trial, and the first book for your Audible subscription is going to be on us. So it's kind of giving a whole new meaning to free trial, huh? Because you're getting a free book with the free trial. Either way, Youtini.com/audible, it's got all the information that you need. Even if you decide not to move forward with the subscription, you still get to keep that free book. But I think you'll find out that this is one of those subscriptions that is worth paying for every month. Go check it out. A couple of housekeeping things though before we get started talking about this huge stack of comics that I have right here. Some of these comics are going to fall on the Legends timeline, which is that timeline that takes place before Disney purchased Lucasfilm in 2014. And some of these comics are going to be on the canon timeline, which was anything that was published after Disney purchased Lucasfilm. If you're not totally sure on what I mean by the difference between canon and Legends, I have a link in the description below that is going to take you to Emma's video where she covers everything that you need to know on the difference in those two timelines. Another thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the comics is the type of comic that we're dealing with. Some of these comics may be a continuing series, meaning that there are 10, 20, 30, if you're talking about the Star Wars run, 75 issues in one of these runs that extends over a couple years. Some of the comics in this stack are going to be what we refer to as a limited series. A limited series usually has a limited run, and there's only normally a couple comics that come out in a year or sometimes an even shorter time frame. And then some of these comics are going to be what Marvel refers to as an epic collection, where they put about 20 comics that may be from a couple different runs in one epic collection. I guess that's why they call them epic collections, huh? You also may hear us use terms like a single issue comic or a comic, which is like that individual comic that you may pick up at your comic book store or you download to your Kindle. Or you may hear us talk about the trade paperbacks, graphic novels, the difference between the two. And if you need a little refresher on that, just remember, like, a trade paperback is just going to be a chunk of a longer continuing series, whereas a graphic novel is going to have that entire story from beginning to end in the trade paperback. So it's clear as mud, but that's what we got to work with. A second video that you can check out if you are wanting to know a little bit more about comics and their structure is our comics guide. I've also put a link to that one in the description along with Emma's video from before. Check those out if you haven't already. We've got everything that you need to know. So let's jump into these comics and talk about which ones are the best and why. The best Star Wars comic overall is going to be the Darth Vader Dark Lord of the Sith run. Now, a lot of people out there feel that we have a lot of Darth Vader content, maybe too much Darth Vader content compared to the lack of content with other characters. But what's really great about this run is that it covers Darth Vader's life right after the events of Revenge of the Sith. And as we step into Vader's head and kind of see how he's trying to push away the Anakin that's still in him, we get to see a character that has a lot of development, and seeing it on a comic book page where we can actually visualize some of the things that we're dealing with makes this one really good. It's a 25 issue run, so there are a couple trade paperbacks that you can check out with it. There are also some hardbacks that are being published for this one, so figure out how you want to pick it up and go read it. The best Star Wars canon comic is going to be the Star Wars run that began in 2015. The first trade paperback in that run is Skywalker Strikes, and you can pick this one up and see what Luke, Leia, Han, and the whole gang with the rebellion was doing right after the events of A New Hope. This run actually just ended in 2019 after issue number 75. So if you want a run that doesn't end after 20-25 issues, one that's going to keep you busy for a while, this is a good place to start. Our runner-up for the best canon comic is going to be the Dr. Aphra run, which if you're in the mood for Aphra, you can check out her run, but then you can also check out the Dr. Aphra audio drama that just came out this past summer, which covers the same events. You have a couple different options to get that story. The best Star Wars canon graphic novel, and remember what I said before, graphic novels have the story from beginning to end, from cover to cover, all in one book. Our best canon graphic novel is going to be The Rise of Kylo Ren. This run just finished in spring of 2020, and the trade paperback was just released back in July of 2020. If you've watched the sequel trilogy and you were wondering exactly what happened with Ben Solo in becoming Kylo Ren, meeting the Knights of Ren, meeting Snoke, this graphic novel is going to cover all of those things and give you a completely new perspective on Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, this awesome character from the sequel trilogy. The runner-up for best graphic novel is one of my personal favorites, Star Wars Shattered Empire. Shattered Empire was actually part of the Journey to the Force Awakens publishing initiative, which led up to the release of The Force Awakens in theaters. While we're listing this one as the runner-up for the best graphic novels, Shattered Empire covers the events pretty much right after the Battle of Endor and the Return of the Jedi. It primarily follows two characters that become very prominent later on, even though we don't see them on screen, Poe Dameron's parents. But the perspective that it gives us on what was going on in the galaxy right after the events of Return of the Jedi, it's huge. For anybody looking to jump into some of those novels and things that take place right after the Return of the Jedi, especially in the new canon timeline, Shattered Empire is going to be essential reading to setting up this grand story that eventually leads to the sequel trilogy. In terms of the best Star Wars comics for kids, and also our runner-up, it's Star Wars Adventures. The best comic for kids is going to be the Tales from Vader's Castle comic from the Star Wars Adventures line. But we've actually gone in and just listed the entire Star Wars Adventures run as the runner-up for best Star Wars comics for kids because they are a great introduction into some more in-depth comics that come for an older generation, and they're just fun stories for kids and adults too. Just because they're listed as the kids comic doesn't mean that adults can't read them. The best Legends comic is one that I actually do not have. But it's Dark Empire, which was a Star Wars comic that was published by Dark Horse in the early 90s. It takes place after the events of Return of the Jedi. It has all of our main characters from the original trilogy, and it's one of those early 90s comics that's really credited with sparking this interest into the expanded universe that has turned into what we see today. Since Dark Empire falls in that Legends timeline, we're going to jump to our best Star Wars Legends Epic Collection, which is the Epic Collection Volume 1 of the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars has actually been one of the most fleshed out parts of the entire Star Wars story. So much so that they've kind of rewritten the Clone Wars a couple times now. But there are a couple volumes within the Clone Wars Legend Epic Collection which are going to give us some characters that we are used to seeing in canon, like Quinlan Vos, Asajj Ventress, Obi-Wan and Anakin, those types of things. And just because they're not canon doesn't mean that they're not really awesome stories that are still going to give you some perspective into some of these characters that we know and love. Notable mentions on the list, don't forget to check out things like the Poe Dameron run, which leads up to the events of The Force Awakens, filling us in on what Poe, Leia, all the gang in the Resistance were up to. For those of you who like to follow along with the eras, we have the Age of runs where you could do Age of the Resistance, Age of the Rebellion, Age of the Republic. All of these comics are going to be a really great way to give you a couple different stories of a couple different characters, all within that era within the Star Wars universe. Couple other notable mentions, don't forget the Darth Vader run that started in 2015. There's the Obi-Wan and Anakin limited series run, which is one of the first adventures that Obi-Wan and Anakin went through as a master and apprentice in the new canon timeline. And there's the brand new Star Wars run, which fills in the gaps between Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which we don't have any trade paperbacks available for those yet because we're still in the beginning stages of this run. If you want to follow along with that series, you can pick up the single issues at your local comic book store, or you can subscribe to the series through Amazon and get them on like the Kindle or the Comixology app, which is what I do. So we got all that, right? You all can pass the test at the end of the video where I ask you about each one of these that I just talked about? Of course, I thought so. I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet though. If you go to the description below, there is a link to the best Star Wars comics guide on the Youtini website where you can read more in-depth descriptions, you can see some of the reviews, and you can decide for yourself which comics and which graphic novels are the best. If you feel like we left one out, or you want to talk about one of these comics, or if you just want to share what your favorite comic is, be sure to leave a comment below, or you can tweet us, Instagram us, Facebook us, whatever. We want to hear what you guys think. If your favorite comic was on the list, then awesome. We're glad that you think that too. You can get more Youtini by checking out our Living Force podcast, which goes live every Monday night at 7 o'clock on Twitch. You can also check out past episodes on our YouTube channel, or you can download the podcast app through wherever you get your podcasts from. Youtini has a positive community of Star Wars fans where you can get in touch with everybody who runs the site and everybody who loves Star Wars through things like our Discord, those social media channels that I mentioned earlier, or just by checking out the website. We love to hear from all of our followers, so stay safe out there, and remember, the Force will be with you always.